Bienvenue à vous tous et à vous toutes à notre rencontre virtuelle. J'espère que tout le monde reste en bonne santé. C'est vraiment un temps difficile, très dur pour tout le monde. Et c'est vraiment un plaisir de voir tout le monde réuni ensemble pour notre session virtuelle aujourd'hui. Alors, un grand bienvenue à vous tous. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations in this country, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work, to live, and to meet on this territory. This is obviously a very challenging time for our artists, for the sector, lots of anxiety, but we very much appreciate the efforts that our government leaders, our public sector funders have been doing and moving quickly to support the sector. We really feel a genuine sense of urgency to help, which is very much appreciated. And so we're so pleased to be able to host Simon Brault today, our CEO of the Canada Council, who has been extremely busy advocating on our behalf. And we very much appreciate that and look forward to our conversation. Now, before we move on to our conversation with Simon, I'd like to welcome Sean Casey from Global Public Affairs. They've been a wonderful partner for us right from the get-go. The start of the crisis with our first hosting of the Minister of Canadian Heritage, of course, and so on. And it's been wonderful to have you on the ground in Ottawa and supporting the sector as you do. I thought it would be great to have Sean just give an overview of all of the various measures that are out there and available for the sector at this particular time, and to give you a sense of what more we will be working on to support the sector as we go through this crisis together. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you again for the opportunity for this is now partnership number 3 on these webinars. And again, I'd like to always acknowledge that perhaps we're saving the best. I won't say for last because we may have other ones, but we're very, very pleased to have Simon Brault, CEO of the Canada Council, joining us on this. He has been integral in terms of the outreach he has been done, the work that he's been doing literally on a daily, if not hourly basis with the Department of Canadian Heritage and with Minister Guilbeault and his team. And I'd like to acknowledge the great work that his organization is doing along with his rather large team in terms of making sure that the art sector is heard, acknowledged, and has the mechanisms they need to be supported moving forward. Now, some of those mechanisms have been launched already. The Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, the portal for that opened on Monday. Many organizations are taking advantage of that. But as we have found through this, there are always unintended consequences. There are hiccups in the process. And again, we have been working through Business for the Arts and many of the other organizations we work with to try to solve some of those problems from the outset. Same with the Canadian Emergency Business Account, which is the $40,000 zero interest loan that many organizations have not only applied for, but have received. Again, the payment parameters on that have been extended over the past week from the end of 2020 to the end of 2022. But of course, the one thing that everyone in the sector would like to talk about is this new $500 million fund that was announced by the Minister of Canadian Heritage and the Prime Minister just a little over 2 weeks ago. We have had daily conversations with the Minister's office on that. Again, they are looking to release the parameters of that in the next couple of days. I don't want to steal too much of Simon's thunder. He may discuss that a little bit further. But I did want to turn it over to my colleague, Tara Mazurk, because this $500 million allotment is the first of 3 phases the Minister's office is looking at. And I would like to give her the opportunity to discuss a little bit about phase 2 and 3 and the direction that the government is looking at going to support the sector on that. Tara, over to you.
Thank you, Sean. So of course, what we've heard from the government is right now they are in emergency measure mode. This phase of just keeping organizations open and going through with the supports like the wage subsidy, the business account, Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and the $500 million that have gone through Canadian Heritage. So government is very curious about how will these funds flow, who is falling through the cracks in emergency support. And then phase 2 will look at the reopening of the economy. Now, we aren't fully into phase 2 just yet, but people are starting to think about that. We know that provinces are rolling out their frameworks. A number of sectors and regions in arts and culture are thinking about their own guidelines. What would it take for us to reopen safely? And how can we connect with government to help develop some of those parameters? Which sectors in arts and culture will be further down the line for reopening? Who can open a little bit sooner? So people are starting to think about reopening the economy. And then further along the line, government will be looking at more structural stimulus support. So not just how do we keep organizations going during this emergency period, but what will it take to restabilize and get things a little bit more back to normal as we possibly can. There's a couple other supports that are just worth noting really quickly. That's the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which is the $2,000 for individuals for up to 4 weeks. Some of their frequently asked questions have been updated on their website related to artist royalties and sole proprietors who may also pay themselves dividends. So if that applies to you, I would encourage you to check the CERB website and questions and answers. And then, of course, the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, which was recently announced with provinces and territories, where tenants will have to pay 25% and landlords and governments will cover the other 75%. These are forgivable loans to commercial landlords, so that is how the money will be managed, and it will flow through to tenants, including those who are nonprofits and charities who have temporarily ceased operations or can demonstrate a 70% decline in revenue. And we, of course, are waiting for some answers on how do you calculate that decline in revenue, what counts as temporarily ceasing operations. So we are waiting for more details there. So that is just a quick overview of some of the existing supports. We're going to head into the presentation from Simon Brault, Director and CEO for the Canada Council for the Arts. And I will note that we will have a question and answer period after. There are a few questions submitted in advance that we will go through. If you do want to ask a question, please use the question and answer icon down at the bottom of the screen instead of the chat box. That will help us moderate any of the incoming questions. And please keep your questions to those that are broader in nature for the Canada Council for the Arts, not on specific applicants or specific files. And with those logistical notes, I would like to welcome Simon Brault. Thank you so much, Simon.
Merci. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation, and I want to thank everybody to attend. I will start directly by saying that over the last, since the beginning of this crisis, so since the beginning of March 13 for us, this is the moment where we, Canada Council, decided to transition in telework, and we entered in a crisis mode, crisis management mode. What has been our obsession was to make sure that we would present the government with options in terms of how to best support the sector, our clients, but I would say the cultural sector at large. And at the very beginning of this crisis, we submitted a lot of very ambitious proposals to the government to cover what we were evaluating to be the needs of the sector to go through the crisis. We realized quite rapidly, like all Canadians, that the approach that was taken by the government was to first try to put in place universal measures for individuals first, then for businesses, and eventually come to sectoral measures where we are right now. And I think it's kind of so we kind of changed that council. We adjusted the way we were in our daily conversations. We readjusted our approach to make sure first that any universal measure would be adjusted in order to cover as much as we can, as much as they can, the specificities of the art sector. Let's talk about the art sector. So both in terms of the reality of the individuals working in the arts sector, so employees and self-employed, but also in terms of the businesses of the arts sectors, the way they are structured. So a lot of work has been done, sometimes very, very complicated, because, as you know, since the beginning of this crisis, what we are witnessing is really an approach where you always have an announcement that is made and the design follows. So it's announced fast and design later. And the announcement is obviously all the time kind of politically driven. And the design is done in a discussion between politics and the bureaucracy. So sometimes the intentions are very clear, but the design is not easy to realize. And we'll talk about the 500 million, but this is where we are with the 500 million right now. So what we did, frankly, was constantly to really advocate and argue and give advice and use the knowledge, the database, and everything we have at Canada Council, really to inform, to make sure that the best adjustments would be made to cover the sector. My calculation after the surveys we did and all of that is probably that for the moment, there's almost $3.4 million, $1 billion that have been committed by the government that are impacting the cultural sector at large. If you consider that, you know, half of the 640,000 employees or people working in this sector are covered by either the 75% subsidy to businesses or the universal allocation, and that's a very conservative figure. You're close to $3 billion. So it's a major support that is already in place. But again, it's never enough, and it's certainly not enough because there are many situations that are not well covered. The government made the, so just to say that we really moved from proposal that were sectoral, then went back to universal, and now what we are trying to see is what was in the first options we presented to the government, what is still not covered by the universal measures. And the $500 million that had been announced by the Prime Minister. And by the way, I think it's nothing to notice that even if you compare the situation all over the world, the Prime Minister of our country made a very strong statement on the importance of arts and artists. It's strangely enough, I'm coming from Quebec, and journalists are saying that even here in Quebec, the Premier did not make an announcement talking directly to the artists. So that was really kind of a pivotal moment. We feel, we know that the distribution of that amount of money is almost completed, will be announced beginning of next week by the minister. And it's clear that the intention of that package, the 500 million package, the intention is to try to cover what is not really covered by the universal measures that have been put in place right now. It's a very difficult task to achieve because mainly it is addressed for the businesses. And one of the difficulty we have with the businesses in the arts sector is that their workforce is made of employees and self-employed. And at this moment, it's not obvious that for kind of a recompose that workforce, it's not easy to do. So we'll see what the government will do, but probably they will try to channel all that money through the channels that already exist. So Telefilm, Canada Council, PCH, and other entities. And we know that many clients of PCH are with Canada Council and sometimes are with Telefilm and sometimes with others. So there have been a lot of work over the last few days to make sure that we would know who is where and who should deal with whom. That work, that very boring work, but very important work, is almost done. because we will want to be absolutely ready the minute we have the public announcement is done, in order to deliver that support directly to the organizations in the arts sector and the sports sector. And I think that's the commitment that everybody have. For council, what has been very, and I can answer questions about that after, but for the Canada Council, what has been a big preoccupation since the beginning of this crisis was to again push to get the best way, the best support for the arts sector to navigate this crisis. But we were always very, very aware that we needed to protect the capacity of the council itself to be there, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. I observed, because I'm the chair of the International Federation of Arts Council, that many arts councils or cultural agencies in the world have been tasked by the government very, very rapidly at the beginning of this crisis to really play a role to support the sector. And the direct consequence of that is that a lot of them have no capacities anymore. And the government are not sure if they want to trust them. And that's for me a huge problem, because at this moment, I feel that the government pays attention to every sector, including the cultural sector and the arts sector. And I think it will be the case during the full crisis. But it's obvious that when the economy will be rebooted, that the attention to the cultural sector will need to come from, obviously, the Telefilms or the Canada Council, the portfolio, the Ministry of Canadian Heritage. And if we are without any money and without any resource, it will be very problematic, because we're entering probably a long period of chaos for the sector. So we have been very, very, for us, it was very important, for instance, when we announced the 35% annual grants that would be paid during the first 40 days of our fiscal year. I said to my staff, it's really important not to put the Canada Council in a situation where we would have huge cash flow problems, because again, we need to be there now and for the continuation of things. So I think that what is great for the moment is that most of the support, I mean, if not all the support that has been handled to the arts sector across Canada, came either from money directly from government, so from finance, or came because we adjusted the cash flow, we injected cash flow into the sector. But we did not make any decision to cancel any program or rechannel money and all of that, because we did not want to be, again, in a situation where we could not fully support all the different activities of the arts sector now and in the future. What we see now is that probably, certainly for the arts sector, what we realize is that the arts sector has been one of the first sector that took a hit with this crisis because of the nature of what we do, and will probably be one of the sector that will be the last to not being impacted by the sanitary measures. And that is something we kind of, nobody likes it, and everybody will try to find works around, and we will probably succeed to a certain extent. But I think it's very important to understand that we are in a crisis management mode, probably for a period of time that could be extended to 2 years, until the moment there will be really a vaccine, that there will be a solution to control this virus. There will be challenges for big parts of the arts sector in terms of how we deal with that, and there won't be any magic solution. So we are really now observing that not only the danger of contamination, the danger of second and a third wave of contamination, the difficulty, the mobility within our country and internationally, all these realities will be at play at different degrees for a lot of time, and they will impact the fundamentals of our operations for a long period of time. So we think at this point that what is really important is we need to figure out where should we position the art sector in the context of relaunching the economy, in the context of recovery, in the context of stimulus package. We think that probably the period for emergency support will need to be extended. Clearly, 16 weeks is not enough. We have to really go through the summer. So it's a long period of time, and probably until January there will be, depending of the artistic discipline and the region of the country and all of that, probably till January 2021. We will need to have emergency measures that will be economically driven. And for the Canada Council, it's kind of a different dynamic for us, because we now are doing, we're working now with two different kind of a culture. One is really, our normal values, artistic excellence and feasibility and all of that. That's the granting operations of the Canada Council. But we have now kind of a parallel operation, which is more economic support, where we don't want to put artistic merit and all those considerations as the drivers. We want to put needs and do everything possible in order to help to avoid the collapse of the infrastructure and the collapse of organizations in the sector. So it's delivering, for instance, a portion of the 500 million will be completely driven by a sense of an understanding and a sense of answering the needs of the sector, but also in terms of being in line with the intention of the economic measures that are decided by the government. So this is not something we are used to do at Canada Council, but we feel that for the interest of the sector, we need to do it, and we need to do it right, and we need to do it in a transparent and fair way, while at the same time continuing our granting operations, and understanding that even granting will be profoundly impacted during the next period of time, and probably a long period of time, where we cannot expect when we grant and when we give a grant to an organization, we cannot expect the organization to do exactly what they would have done in normal circumstances. So the kind of the moral contract between Canada Council as a public funder and the recipients of those funds will evolve over the next few months, and maybe over the next few years, in order to make sure that we will adjust to what is feasible, what is possible, and also to make sure that in that context there will be some kind of not only adjustment, but probably some reinvention in terms of how we work, how we communicate, how we sustain the sector on the long term. During and I'm aware of the time, during that crisis, one thing we realized was that the importance of digital became very, very obvious. As you know, the Canada Council created in 2017 its Digital Strategy Fund. It was an important fund, and actually the idea was to have, and this is where we are now, to have 10% roughly of all the investments we are making in the art sector that would be devoted to this transition, adaptation to digital. And the thinking like 4 years ago was that 10% was needed in order to protect the 90% of what we support. With this crisis, we realized that this was almost visionary. I mean, I'm so lucky, I'm so happy that we decided to do that, because we realized that this 10% investment is now absolutely critical to protect everything and everything we do. The crisis, kind of the crisis and the confinement, created a situation where everybody, so artists and audience, everybody needed to switch to digital. It was the only way to maintain contact with the people we love, with everything we value in life, including arts and culture. So what we observed during the last period of time is that a lot of artists use digital essentially to bridge with the audience, to keep a bridge, to keep contact, to make sure that they would not lose, they would not disappear for their audience. And a lot of very interesting work has been done. And what we feel now is that it was important for the Canada Council to inject special money to help that for individuals and now for organizations, in order to make sure that not only we would maintain that contact, but now we understand that we may need to maintain that contact for a longer period of time. And we may be in a situation where that we will have to combine very intelligently a digital presence with a physical presence, as much as we can have a physical presence depending of the public health conditions. So for us, this the importance of that, the investment in digital is absolutely critical right now. And the idea is not to argue or to argue that digital should replace everything. It's not that. But we realize that it's probably one of the essential contact and channel that could be maintained no matter what the situation is. And for that reason only, it's very important, but also because we are at this point. It's interesting because a lot of observations that have been made for the performing arts, for instance, over the last few years, that our audience was aging. And interestingly enough, the use of digital to do anything but, shopping and all of that was not that popular for an aging audience. And now that part of the audience had no choice but to migrate to digital. So, and they may be part of this audience also because they are more fragile, maybe also partially confined for a certain number of time, but they are the most faithful patrons for the performing arts. So I think there are many possibilities to kind of combine different approaches, digital, non-digital, and I think there's also a moment where there's a link between digital and proximity, because over the last 10 years, what we saw was that the big movements in terms of culture and digital were more driven by international platforms, by things that were far away. And I think right now digital is really a tool for proximity. People use it to have to see their children, grandchildren, to see their friends, to see their local artists, as opposed to kind of replace seeing their local artists, physically, and then everything else we do on digital is international. I think there are many profound sociologic changes that are happening right now that are offering possibilities. The challenges are still there. There's a lot of issues around how do you fund it, how do you monetize that. But also there are real questions that we need to ask. So like, okay, we support, performing arts, for instance, or visual arts. We subsidize it because it's anyway not feasible without public subsidizing. So why don't we do that for digital? I mean, I think all those questions are on the table right now, and we will need to be very imaginative over the next few years. So I just want to conclude, because I would like to have a question. I just want to say that Canada Council has been very active, has been there since the first second of this crisis. We will be there to continue the discussion on emergency measures. We will be at the table for the discussions on recovery and stimulus package, no doubt. We also want to make sure that we will have the capacity with the sector and conversation with the sector to come with kind of approaches that are adapted to the situation. But also we feel that this is a moment for the sector to be very united, very strong. This is a moment for the sector also to become more resilient than we were before this crisis. And I think there are many, many things we can do to to transform some of our weaknesses or vulnerability in strengths for the future. And I think it's and for us as a public funder, many of the things we are observing are worrying. Some things are very interesting and very promising, but all in all, it's a wake-up call, I think, again, for innovation. It's a wake-up call for unity, and it's a wake-up call for solidarity. So that's my opening remarks. And if you have questions, I will be more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon, for your presentation. Of course, there are a list of 6 pre-submitted questions for the webinar that we're going to get into now. And then we will be taking a few questions from the floor. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A box, the icon at the bottom of the screen, not the broader chat box, and keep your questions broad for the Canada Council, not on any particular applicant situation. Thank you so much. So we'll dive into our first pre-submitted question, which is, if programming is not possible for an organization, how will organizations be expected to use their Canada Council funds to sustain their organizations?
It's an excellent question, and obviously there's not one answer to that question, because again, it absolutely depends on where you are, which discipline, what is your artistic practice and all of that. But our answer and my answer will be that we have no intention to withdraw our support because the organizations we are normally supporting cannot do what they would have done before this crisis. So what we want to do is we really need to come to terms with reality and make sure that the support we give will help the organization not only to survive, but to adapt to the situation and to a certain extent to reinvent themselves if they need to reinvent themselves. I think there will be a lot of thinking and a lot of decisions that will have to be made in terms of our business models, in terms of who do we collaborate with. There are organizations who will face situations where international collaboration may be more complex depending of which type of collaborations they are. So for us, the way we will address all that with the program officer, the directors, the entire Canada Council will really be to see again what is possible and how can we redefine what is expected from an organization supported by the Canada Council according to their situation. So it's not a question simply, okay, we will send a check and nothing happens. I think it will be really trying to make sure that the support that is given is I'm sorry. Okay, so sorry. So yes, we will want to again to keep the relationship, the funding relationship with the organization, but obviously to redefine what the expectations are, taking into consideration what is the reality of the organization there. We will make the best of that funding relationship in the context that we will face, that is unknown.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. And then, of course, a related question, similarly on the topic of grants. Someone was wondering if the grant revenue from Canada Council will remain the same going forward during and post-pandemic. So can someone apply for a grant as they normally would for a future project and assume that the same pot of money is there? Or is the money being taken from regular grant streams to go towards emergency funding during the pandemic and the aftermath?
Yeah, my position as CEO since the beginning, it was exactly not to impair our capacity to play our full role, and so we did not at Canada Council did, as I said, what others did, where they put all their money and just put that in emergency measures. I think there was an incredibly opportunity for the arts sector to be treated on equal foot with any other sector of society. And this is what, and it is happening now with the government, and I'm very grateful for that. So no, we did not rechannel, or I think that all the capacities of the council to support all its programs are still there, and they will remain there. This is the 5th year of the progressive doubling of the Canada Council. This is the final year. I have no indication, heard nothing about the fact that the Canada Council's budget could be cut or reduced. So we will obviously do some cash management. For instance, right now we're not spending a lot on international touring for very obvious reason, but that money stays for international. It has not been rechanneled elsewhere for the moment. So our intention, and again, we live now in the new normal is uncertainty, but in that context, our approach is to be prudent and is to make sure, again, that we preserve our capacity to be a major player in terms of funding. And we will probably look for more and more partnerships with other funders and public or private and all of that. But we know that if we don't have the financial capacity and the data to do it, we won't make it happen. So we're protecting that. I'm clearly with my staff the guardian of the integrity of our financial capacities.
Simone, that makes very good sense, and a healthy and robust Canada Council is what we all need. Absolutely. Now, the third question we have here, and we had many questions submitted to us, is around the Digital Strategies Fund you mentioned earlier. The question is, I have heard that changes are being made to the Digital Strategies Fund in order to help arts organizations respond to the COVID crisis. Could you explain these changes and discuss whether the fund will do more to help organizations take their programming digital?
Actually, we just released yesterday a lot of information around that. It's on the website. What we kind of decided to do what is really to open the entire fund. It's an important fund on a kind of an ongoing basis, especially during this summer, to make sure that anyone who has any project, any organizations up to $50,000 could apply at any moment. And we are speeding up the assessment process. It will be more internal to make sure that it will be feasible during this period of time, because we, again, realize that it's a moment where the needs are great, but there's also opportunities, and we don't want to be in a situation where people will just miss those opportunities to do that. So again, this is not, we don't take money from elsewhere. This is really money that was budgeted and that is part of the Digital Strategy Fund. But we kind of adjusted and made it even more flexible than it was for both for individuals with the project up to $5,000, and for organizations with up to $50,000 in any component of the digital fund. So this fund, obviously, which was meant to be a transition for 4 years, probably will be extended, but we realize that there will be many transitions taking place at the same time, and that Canada Council will need to protect a portion of its budget that is to help those specific transitions on top of the regular granting process that we are. And because the digital fund is a strategic fund, it means that it could be accessed if you are a core funded client or if you are not a funded, so both. So this is why it's really a strategic fund that is open to the entire sector. and we will keep it as it is now. So I invite you to go on, the information is on our website right now, and to talk to our staff, but we'll be very, very active on the front of digital this summer, no doubt.
That makes perfect sense. And on the subject of a relaunch of the arts when the time comes, beyond a digital presence, the next question was submitted in French, et je vais juste communiquer en français pour celui-là. Monsieur Brault, vous vous montrez très positif quant à la reprise des activités des artistes, entre autres par le biais du numérique et des médias sociaux. Pourtant, la plupart des artistes présents sur le web actuellement le font gratuitement, ce qui n'est absolument pas garant d'une relance de la pratique professionnelle des arts. De plus, les arts de la scène en particulier ne trouveront pas leur relance dans le numérique. Comment envisagez-vous la relance des arts autrement que par le numérique? So how else do you envision, this is a very tough question, a relaunch?
I think, first of all, we don't see digital as a way necessarily or only as a way to kind of organize the recovery or the reboot of art practice. We see it both as, for the moment, as a way to, again, to maintain the contact between artists and artistic companies and their audiences. And we also see digital in itself because there's a lot of artistic creation that is happening on digital, and we feel it's important. But what we see now, and this is precisely why we are investing, it's true that it's not easy to monetize that. And we feel that by offering support directly to artists, to organizations to do it is a way to fund it with public funds. So we feel that it's important enough and it's valuable enough that it could be and it should be supported by public fund. And the deal we made with Radio-Canada CBC is also very important because, again, it's a way to make sure that we could use public platforms to advance that presence. I think the question of the relaunch or the recovery of the sector and digital, it's not necessarily that digital is a condition for recovery. There are organizations or arts forms that don't need it so much, but I think that the recovery will be progressive. I'm not a specialist of public health, but I can see that there's a lot of concerns all over the world around the question of contamination, around the question of possible other waves of pandemic. So in a situation like that, we know that there will be a long period of time probably where we will need to operate at a different scale. And during that long period of times where we will operate at different scale, we will probably need a combination of digital, non-digital, in order to be present. And I think at this very point, what is important for us is to make sure that the arts are not disappearing from public conscious. So we need to be present, we need to be visible, and I think that any way to do it will be important and is worthwhile of public support and private support. I guess that the answer on how things will restart is a very complex one, and again the answer is very different if you are operating. We see that in the world right now. We see that it's easier if you are in an open space. People, we see that in other countries, they can go to open space. They are less afraid than to go to a closed space. It depends of how you can control circulation. It's probably easier in some large galleries to think that there will be activities sooner than later than it is in some performing arts venues. I think but all the answers to that cannot come from a public funder or cannot come even from the art sector. They will come from public health and they will come from authority, and we will adapt to that. And I think that understanding that for me as the CEO of a public funding agency, for me, what is important is to try to find the ways to deliver the right and specific support in order to help the sector to navigate those different avenues that we don't know. So there will be a lot of trials, there will be a lot of attempts, there will be a lot of proposals, and we will kind of examine what they are and adapt how we support the sector with our own funds or with government funds, because it's possible, again, that if this sector has to suffer for a longer period of time because of the nature of our activity, we have an argument to ask for support from the society in terms of making sure that we will be maintained alive as a sector, because we play a role not only as a sector in terms of jobs and all of that, but I profoundly believe that arts and culture generate social confidence and social trust, and there's no economy when there's no social trust and social confidence. So for that reason, it's possible that we will have to make a plea to endure a longer period of impossibilities to operate. And I'm ready to make this plea with all of you, for sure.
Wonderful, Simon. Down to the final two questions. Given that many performing arts organizations whose primary activity is producing receive very limited, if any, support from Canadian Heritage, has Council had discussions with Canadian Heritage about recovery support for organizations that receive operating and program support through Council? Specifically, will the Council have access to a portion of the $500 million announced for culture and sports? And if so, will there be a rapid response program that provides funds to stabilize organizations or clients of the Council?
The answer is yes, we will have a share of it. The minister said it since day one, and I know we will have one. That will be for him to announce how the money is distributed. We're not really at this moment, the 500 million is not a recovery package. We're not in the phase of recovery. We are still in the phase of avoiding the collapse. So this is where we are. So the 500 million has been announced as a way, again, to complement what has been announced in terms of universal programs for individuals and businesses. I think the recovery is much bigger than 500 million. And I think the discussion will start, I don't know, probably in a few weeks from now. But we will definitely deliver a portion, a share of that 500 million. And the way we will, the approach that we have been proposing is that the funder or the funding agency that is supporting the most, let's say you have a grant from 6 different sources at the federal level, the granting agency that should take care of you is the one that gives you the higher amount. So we want to make sure that, you know, no one is defavored because they have many different sources of revenue, and that arbitration will be done within the portfolio of Canadian Heritage. The minister understands that, and we're working, and we all work together right now. There's a huge collaboration within the portfolio. We're, I would say, breaking the silos as never before, while maintaining our relationship as an arm's length agency for our own decision. But in terms of coordinating the emergency measures, especially around the delivery of that 500 million, I can tell you, and I'm not a politician, I'm not talking about on behalf of the government, but I can tell you that the level of coordination right now is amazing. And we all want to make sure that we give the best possibly delivery and the most rapid delivery of that money to the art sector. But again, 500 million is, it's a sector that generates, you know, $54 billion, I guess, every year. So 500 million is a tiny part. It looks big when you think about your personal budget, but it's not big. So, and that 500 million is probably adding to, as I said, 3.4. We're probably at 4 billion in terms of money that is lending on the sector to go through this crisis, but only for a period of 3 months, 16 weeks actually. So if the period is longer, we will need more money to support it. But we should learn about the distribution and the conditions to access that money next week. That's what I hear.
Okay.
We'll all follow that very closely, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And the final of the pre-submitted questions, again, is one that's looking a little bit more to the future.
Yep.
And the question is the Canada Council playing a role in the guidelines for phasing in mass gatherings related to rehearsals and performances? Yeah.
Actually, what we do, I mean, public health, as you know, is those decisions are at the provincial and territorial level first. We don't play a role in terms of, we cannot instruct, doctors and scientists how to do that. What we try to do is to understand what their point of view is and their requirements are. And yes, we are in discussion on that. And what we try to see is, what are the consequences of that on the business model? If you have to present a show and it's impossible to have then more than 20% of the hall full, what does it mean? Is it, and I see, again, many discussions happening all over the world right now around that. And we are learning a lot. And the sector is also. So for us, our role is to make sure, and I invite you, when any one of you, when you have very precise idea, what is important for us is not so much to okay or not, but it's to be able to tell the government and to adjust ourselves to what are the requirements once we know that this is the only way to proceed. And what are the consequences, and is it worthwhile to do it? Should we support organizations to present shows that are a complete disaster from a financial point of view, or should we support them to do something else? I mean, those discussions are the discussions that will take place over the next few months within and around the Canada Council.
Great.
But we will be there. I think that I think, and I'm very, it generates a lot of anxiety because we live in a situation where everything is uncertain, and there's nothing we can do. Uncertainty will be there for a long period of time. The only thing that is certain is that we will all be there, and the Canada Council will be there, and we will address the situation in a timely and creative and compassionate way. That's the only thing that you can be certain of. Everything else, we understand it's very difficult to plan anything because a lot of the conditions for things to happen are medical. They are, we have no control on them. So I think we need to be very clear on what do we have control on and how do we adapt, react, how, and I know it's nerve-breaking, but that's the world in which we are right now. And I think for all of us, we need also to be able to understand that no one has the recipe book, and we need to be patient, we need to be compassionate, we need to listen carefully to each other, and we need to understand that there will be that this relaunch of the cultural sector will be uneven depending of what is the nature of what we do, and we need to accept that.
Great, Simon, thank you so much. These are great words for us to live by right now in this definitely time of uncertainty. I know we're coming up to time, but for those of you who can stay with us, we have received a number of questions, and we certainly want to address at least a couple of them. So Simon, you're happy to stay. I'm going to hand it over to Monica from our team at Business and Arts, who's been monitoring the questions that we've received. And I know, Monica, you're going to start with a couple.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just check in before each question, just being cognizant of your time and to keep us on track. So the first question that we have is concerning provincial funding as well. So the question is, how are Canada Council and provincial arts funding bodies aligning? What types of discussions does the CAC have these days with its provincial and territorial counterparts? And do you know if these provincial funders will be contributing to help as well?
First, there are many conversations with provincial funders. It's almost daily. We realized when it started that the council, council had the capacity, for instance, to create a lot of communication pieces at the very beginning. We were very fast there. The question of communication is a huge contribution, maintaining the communication and clarity and all that. So we are collaborating a lot. It's clear that in terms of the emergency measures, the funding of the emergency measures is at this moment federal. It really came mostly from the federal government. So because of that, and because being an arm's length agency, we are also part generally of the broad machinery of government in Ottawa. This is why we kind of we're constantly in contact with everybody to understand what are the needs, what is the most urgent things to do and all that. And we at Canada Council, my position was not to say, okay, we want to favor with this group or that group or that group. It was always trying to, what do you say, what are the others say, and how can we influence the measures at the federal level to make sure that it would cover as much as we can. And it's the same thing with the 500 million. They are, as you can imagine, incredible lobbies coming from all the different regions, groups, industries, and all of that. And the arbitration is done at the higher level. And for us, what is really important is to make sure that we represent, in a sense, and we argue for the art sector. So there's a lot of collaboration with the, for instance, when we made, we needed to say, okay, what will be the period for which we won't support any international activities? That has been coordinated, in Quebec, for instance, where it's a big deal and there's so many companies, Calc and Conseil des Arts. When we did the advancement of a proposal, the 35%, I tried to find out very rapidly what were the others doing, and knowing that probably at the municipal level, they could put more money first, but less money, and then provincial and then federal. So there's a lot of collaboration. I think it will be absolutely needed for the future. Obviously, the level of funding from each province and territory is very uneven across the Canada. And my concern as the CEO of the Canada Council is always to make sure that we have a leverage effect on what is happening at the local or at the provincial level, as opposed to replace their funding, because we don't want to have a situation where the more the federal government is putting money, the less provinces and municipalities are. So we really are working together, I would say more than ever. And I think it's the same for the sector. We won't survive if we don't collaborate and work all together.
Thank you. So you have time for another question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, perfect. This one concerns the breakdown of applying the funds.
Yep.
So the question is, can Canada Council grants for projects be applied towards fixed costs like wages and rent if the project cannot be delivered? And also, would there be dedicated or specific support to help transition to online or digital presentations?
For the digital presentation, yes, and yes, it's the 5,000 and the 50,000. So the details are on the website. In terms of adjusting project funding, I would say wait until you hear about the news on the 500 million, because project fundings at Canada Council could go to organizations. So sometimes it goes to organizations who have core funding, sometimes to organizations who have only project funding, and project funding is also going to individuals. So the 500 million, as the Prime Minister said, is meant to support organizations, businesses. So once we will have clarity on to which extent organizations are supported, then we will see what we do with organizations who have project funding, and what do we do with individuals who have project funding. But the rule at Canada Council right now, the policy is flexibility. So if people have, project funding, they have questions, please contact us, and we're very flexible. What we want to do is We want to maintain the operation, but again, we don't want to replace granting money. We don't want to transform granting support into emergency support. I'm trying as much as we can to have emergency support to support, again, the business continuity, and granting support to support the continuity of artistic creation. So we try to maintain that as much as we can. And for the moment, we have the possibility of doing it. And this is how we operate. This is how we make our choices.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a few more questions, but I don't want to keep you past 12 much longer just because I'm already aware.
Okay, so let's take another 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll ask
Maybe
one
the
final...
last question, Monica.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So this will be the final one. Asking about new applicants. So would new applicants be at all considered in this situation?
New applicants, I mean, we still have new applicants, just to give you a sense, and that is really amazing. The Canada Council received, we just closed a competition for artistic creation, and we have the highest number ever at Canada Council in terms of projects that have been submitted to the Canada Council. We're talking about thousands and thousands. So clearly they are new applicants. Obviously the $500 million, it will be for the government to announce that, but the $500 million, I suppose, will go to organizations that are already in the system, maybe a little bit more than that, because again, the Canada Council itself is not an agency to deliver emergency economic support. We will do it because we said we could do it for our clients and our jurisdiction, and I think it's our duty to do it, but we won't become an economic agency. This is not our role. So the answer is yes, we can have new applicants for our regular program, and for the emergency help, we need to see the details next week.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'll pass
Thank
it over
you.
to Robert Foster now.
Simon, I have the delightful opportunity to say thank you, thank you, thank you. You, first and foremost, you have brought to us today both short, medium, and long-term thinking. And that is the one thing that I consistently see is required for any organization, either within the cultural community or business community, to ensure survival. So the perspective you have brought today, I think, is both encouraging but essential to building the kind of community that we had and we will undoubtedly have once again. I might also add that in your relatively new role as chair of the International Federation of Arts Councils, you're passionate about cultural diplomacy. It has been one of my passions for a long time, and I'm just thrilled to see it bubbling back to the surface. You said those funds are going to be held and continue to be available for that. And I think that's very exciting for the Canadian cultural community as well. Crisis leadership is the measure of any great leader, and you are providing strong crisis leadership, and for that we're especially thankful. You clearly have a voice with the government, and you are representing all of us, and again, that's something for which we're both appreciative and thankful. I might add that business and arts has been bringing together the community, both our own organization, our advocacy committee, the Canadian Arts Council, and others, to present a voice of unity to the government with strong recommendations. And I'm, as chair, particularly proud of our team led by Nicole, who is doing just a superb job, and Maggie and Monica and Alyssa, Karen. So we are fortunate to have all of you, and for that we say thank you as well. And I know they have a good relationship with you, and that matters to us. I might also just conclude by saying it's not often you get someone who cares about both arts and the economy, and you've learned to put both those hats on and make them fit, and we're very fortunate for all of that. Digital, I would just give a little shout out. Last night, Stratford had on Coriolanus and a half-hour pre-show chat with Robert Lepage. It was absolutely wonderful and does show what digital can do. It does spoil one when you sit there with a glass of wine at home and watch something as marvelous as that. And every night there seems to be something else on that really is very special. So the digital component is going to stay important. We're all learning from it, and I think we'll all benefit from at least that part of the experience. Finally, you stressed unity and solidarity, and that's something we're working very hard on, and we fully agree with you, and we look forward to a continuing strong relationship with you and with your organization as we rebuild. So thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you, and congratulations for everything you do, and thank you for your leadership. I've been in conversation on a regular basis with Nicole and many of you, and you play a very important role, and I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to talk to so many people today. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Merci, Simon. Bye. Bonne journée.